You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaffe.
Me, Danny Dennard.
And today we're going to talk about a piece of work that was published this spring in the Harvard Business Review. And what happened was UC Berkeley's Haas School embedded researchers inside a 200-person tech company from April of 2025 through to December of 2025. And what they did was they did 40 interviews. They were on site 2 days a week and they did 40 interviews and they published their results. So they were basically living inside a tech company for 6 months. And they were really trying to understand really how AI works inside a decent sized company. What is really happening with it. And that's why I think Dan and I both thought it was an interesting thing to talk about, because lots of the surveys and other pieces and opinion pieces out there that are published are asking people for their opinions. They're doing surveys, but this is really grounded in real work in a real business over a significant period of time, and therefore some interesting conclusions from it. Dan, what was the central message, Dan? Share that with us, and what did you think of it?
Basically, widespread uses of generative AI, so AI to most people, actually didn't free up time. Instead, it expanded what people felt like, what they could, should, and would end up doing. So it led to more tasks, denser days, so actually more working hours, and often less voluntary. That was just something that they did because they felt like they had to. That's probably more conditioning from how careers were shaped than AI more specifically. Days were expanding far more. They were looking far more differently, and people were actually taking tasks that they wouldn't normally do, and they were picking it up and moving forward with them when they're typically a colleague's task or piece of work, because they felt like they should, and they felt like they should be doing more tasks and filling up their day. One thing that was clear in that report was there wasn't the rest that you would have in the day. So it was filling up more of your day. So people didn't have the time to get cognitive distance, and they didn't have the time to, or wouldn't take the time to take the break and step out from that. So they're like my 3 or 4 big core takeaways and lessons from this.
As you say, everybody's sort of been trying bits of vibe coding, haven't they? So now you get people who weren't necessarily coders. Somebody 3 years ago in a role in a company would have gone, right, we need a piece of code to do this, so we need something developed. I'm going to go talk to the development team. I'm going to go out and bring in an external developer to sort this thing out, and then I've got it and I can use it in my job again. Then I'm going, well, I'll have a little go at vibe coding this, or, I'll have a little go at data analysis here. Maybe that's not my gig. So I think you can see it, can't you? I think you and I both, from our own experience and people we've worked with, there's just something, see if I can do that now. I'll see if it'll do it for me. So I absolutely can see how that would happen. And I also think the nature of the experimentation means that, there is this now blurring, this kind of, I'll just do that in my lunch hour. I'll just have a quick look at my coffee break. So you've got this idea of ambient work, I think they talk about, where it's just spread across the day and there's much less definition between work and home, which, to your point, it's really important to get those breaks. Those cognitive breaks are really important. To have time that's out and your brain can decompress. Really, really, really important. So there's some other interesting observations from a genuine study.
There's that critical distancing that people just don't have. So all your best ideas come on when you're in a shower, on a walk, listen to a podcast, or on a holiday. And if people are squeezing more output in their day and trying to take on more tasks, all they're doing is probably lowering the status quo of work as opposed to improving it. And if you're not collaborating well enough, then all that time you're filling up with using AI and not using your superpowers, I think it just highlights that you're not going to get to the point where you're doing excellent work and you're happy to put your name to it. I know we've said that a number of times, but I would I wanted to call it out and bump it back to the top because it is so important.
I agree. I think one of their findings was around multitasking, wasn't it? That people feel productive because they're doing lots of things with AI, but in fact they're running a number of tasks and not really finishing any of them. And again, I can look to myself in the last 12 months. There have been occasions where I've taken a task so far with AI, and then I've had to go and do something else, and then you come back to it, and then you switch in between 2 or 3. So I kind of some of what they were talking about resonated a bit. I think, yeah, I can see that happening. I think to move towards the end, their conclusion was that we really need to manage AI as a work practice, not just as a technical tool. So their suggestion was that smart teams will have rules about when to use it, when not to use it, when to pause, and how to prevent what starts as AI efficiency becoming kind of AI is everywhere overload or worse to that effect. So they're suggesting that again, and we could say that would tie into what we talk about policy and some of the other things. Some of the governance tools we've talked about, policy manifesto, maybe should include some of that stuff and start to evolve to include some guidelines around use that address some of the challenges that this study has found. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's smart if you add that into your AI manifesto. I think it's smart to clearly call out that if it does intensify work, which many people are suggesting it does, that you do have guardrails and you do have the support system, because burnout is real, and the more digital work has become, the more burnouts hit record levels. So I would clearly call that out. And also, if you are going to go and take on more tasks, or you are going to go and work on what would traditionally be your colleagues' work, is how do you set that up and have those conversations that you're going to be picking these tasks up. I've got a couple of bolder suggestions or what could happen in the future. Should we
Go for it.
go through them really quickly?
Yeah, go
So
for it.
work at the moment is really considered, let's call it 10 hours a day for most people. But what some companies were doing was they're putting shifts in. So I often recommend to companies, if you've got a morning person, let them work where they're brilliant. So in the morning into the afternoon. Some people are like afternoon and evening people, let them work in that time. So there isn't huge amounts of crossover, but you can do a handover. They could be really super effective and actually create much better productivity and output. With AI and agents, we might get to the point where we, rather than having to lose jobs and make redundancies and layoffs, we could actually have a system where it was people did a work day, and then their agents or claws go off, do a lot of the job, and you do more editing when you come in. So it feels like you're getting far more, but you also can control the quality of output and the quantity of output. So actually what we might see, and I've said this since last year, is we will see like an agentic layer to teams, but this might be a way that you can foresee and predict and guide work in a better way and reduce the load for your team members. So I do think that's one option. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I do. There's Daniel Pink wrote a book called When, which is a really good read. And one of the things he talks about, exactly as you say, something like 80% of us are morning people and 20% are night owls. And we work at better times of the day. We're more alert. We're more cognitive at different times of the day. That will tie in with what you're talking about. And you could use the agents and the AI pieces to augment that, exactly as you say. So I think it's an interesting idea.
And then the second one is, actually, if we're going to get far more effective with agents, agentic and AI and LLMs in general, and we move away from, maybe just a chat interface, we could probably start looking at 4 and 4.5 day work weeks. So we could start looking at, and the temptation is to add more. What we could do is reduce down some of the tasks and maybe some of the political back and forths. And we could have a reduced work week where maybe the hours go up 1 day a week to complement it, but we might actually see people be able to have a better work-life balance and also reduce that strain that people have and the pressure they have to work in the evening. So this report gave me those two thoughts and feelings. So what do you think around the 4.5 day work week?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger political question there. I mean, all of my life, they've been saying, well, technology will reduce the need for people to work. I think there's a broader question, which is, if everything gets automated and robots take over and agents take over, then nobody's got a job. Then nobody's got any money to buy the products that everything's making. So there's a broader, socioeconomic question globally about how we're going to, people talk about things like universal basic income, that we give everyone a certain amount of money every year, so they've got the money to buy the products, which means the economy still works. I think it'd be fabulous if we get to the point where the robots did all the work and we could just all have a time of leisure. That'd be fabulous. But there's a much bigger economic question. It's going to. History shows us so far that those technical advances that should have made life easier for everyone actually end up making lots of money for a small number of people. And you could almost argue at the bottom end of the economic scale, life gets harder and harder. People are working harder and harder for less and less. And we're not here to talk politics, but you could argue that's the direction it's gone in so far. It's not really gone in the more utopian direction of saying, let's have the robots do all the work and we can then all take and do the things we love and go fishing or skiing or whatever, favorite thing is. Go and do that all day while the robots do all the work. It's there should be the potential, to answer your question, there should be the potential to do what you've described. Whether there's the political will to do that is a different question.
Also, in another episode, we'll talk around my AI marshmallow test idea that I've been. It's not unique because unfortunately I searched it this morning and people have talked around it before. But I do think there is a AI marshmallow test that will give you an idea of how much AI is adopted and how much it's actually overly relied upon. But this report has given me a lot to think around.
That sounds like an absolute cliffhanger to end on, Dan. I'm looking forward to hearing about the marshmallow test. Good to see you, my friend, and I will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.